Sir, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see him.
This is my car. The fob just unlocked it. What crime am I suspected of?
Don't question me. Turn around. Hands behind your back.
Am I being detained or am I free to leave?
You're being detained for
The parking garage was nearly empty at 9:18 p.m. Concrete walls trapped the sound of engines echoing in slow pulses, tires humming somewhere above a faint smell of oil and damp cement hanging in the air. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, pale reflections across the polished black sedan parked near the elevator. "Sir, step away from the vehicle right now." The voice came sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet. The man froze, one hand still holding the key fob, the other resting on the driver's side door handle. He turned slowly. A uniformed police officer stood 10 feet away, one hand on his belt, the other hovering near his radio. His stance was rigid, rehearsed, practiced. "Officer, this is my car. I am leaving. I did not ask for an explanation. Step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them." The man exhaled once, controlled, deliberate. His suit jacket was folded neatly over his arm, his tie loosened after a long day. He raised both hands chest high, the key fob dangling between his fingers. The car responded with a soft electronic click, the lights flashing once in acknowledgement. Ownership made visible in a way words apparently could not. "You see that? The car unlocked. I am the owner." The officer took a step closer instead of backing away. His eyes scanned the man up and down, lingering, measuring. The distance between them closed, the air tightening with it. "Turn around. Place your hands behind your back." "For what reason?" The officer's jaw clenched. "For failing to comply. For acting suspicious." "Suspicious doing what? Unlocking my own car?" The garage felt smaller now. A woman exiting the elevator slowed her pace. A man loading groceries into an SUV paused, phone already halfway out of his pocket. Somewhere above, a car alarm chirped and fell silent again. The man's voice never rose. It stayed level, steady, almost instructional. "Officer, I am informing you that I have done nothing illegal. I am asking if I am being detained." The officer did not answer the question. He moved behind the man, fingers brushing cold metal from his duty belt. The sound that followed was unmistakable. Steel rings sliding free. The soft mechanical whisper of handcuffs opening. "Sir, do not make this harder than it needs to be." The cuffs closed around the man's wrists with a dry click that echoed off concrete. The pressure was immediate, biting. The onlooker shifted. A phone camera light flicked on. Someone whispered, "This is wrong." The man stared straight ahead as the officer tightened the cuffs another notch. His reflection stared back at him from the glossy black paint of the car. Calm face, controlled breathing, a lifetime of courtroom statutes and sworn testimony running silently behind his eyes. "You are making a serious mistake," the man said quietly. The officer leaned closer, voice low and certain. "People like you always say that." In that moment, in that dim garage, the assumption had already been made. Guilt assigned. Authority asserted. And the truth, the real one, had not yet entered the conversation at all. The story pauses here and rewinds, not to excuse what happened in that garage, but to explain how two lives moving in opposite moral directions collided in one narrow space. The man in handcuffs was named Daniel Wright, 46 years old, city-born, city-raised, the son of a school librarian and a bus driver who worked double shifts to keep food on the table and books in the house. Daniel learned early that words mattered, that precision mattered, that if you spoke carefully and listened closely, you could survive spaces not built for you. He earned a scholarship to a public university after graduating top of his class. Law school came next. Nights stocking shelves, mornings in lectures. He watched classmates quit under pressure. He had no luxury to escape. He stayed. He passed the bar on the first attempt. He joined the district attorney's office when the pay was low and the hours were punishing. For 20 years, Daniel prosecuted the cases nobody wanted. Gang violence, domestic abuse, public corruption. He stood in courtrooms where victims shook so badly they could barely speak. He learned how to slow his voice, how to ground a room, how to build a case piece by piece until truth became unavoidable. His conviction rate was high, but his reputation was higher, fair, methodical, relentless with evidence, not ego. He sent violent offenders to prison. He also dismissed cases when police cut corners. He trained younger prosecutors to respect constitutional limits because shortcuts destroyed justice. His name appeared on legal panels and internal memos, not headlines. He did not chase cameras. He believed the law worked best when applied quietly and correctly. That night in the garage, he had just left the office after preparing opening statements for a high-profile corruption trial involving city contractors. He wore a tailored suit because court demanded it. He drove a black sedan because it was reliable and safe, not flashy. Nothing about his presence was illegal. Nothing about his behavior was suspicious. But context is invisible to bias. The officer who stopped him was Officer Ryan Keller, 34 years old, 9 years on the force, considered proactive by supervisors, aggressive by peers. He joined the department straight out of the academy, drawn by authority more than service. Early evaluations praised his confidence but flagged his confrontational style. There were complaints. Not enough to end his career. Enough to form a pattern. Stops that escalated unnecessarily. Body camera footage where his tone shifted when suspects challenged him verbally. A civilian complaint 2 years earlier alleging racial profiling during a traffic stop that ended without discipline due to insufficient evidence. Internal affairs cleared him each time. Reports noted no policy violation. Training reminders were issued. Files were closed. Keller believed deeply in command presence. He believed hesitation invited chaos. He believed respect had to be enforced, not earned. In roll call rooms, he spoke often about criminals knowing their rights too well, about people thinking a suit or a calm voice made them untouchable. That belief hardened over time. Every interaction became a test of dominance. Every question became defiance. The call that brought him to the garage was vague. Suspicious person near a luxury vehicle, no reported crime, no theft in progress, just a presence that made someone uncomfortable. Keller arrived already convinced of what he would find. When he saw Daniel standing next to the sedan, the narrative locked in place. Expensive car, late hour, black man. Keller did not see a prosecutor. He saw a challenge. Daniel's calm did not register as professionalism. It registered as arrogance. His questions about detention did not register as legal literacy. They registered as resistance. By the time Daniel demonstrated ownership of the vehicle, Keller was already committed. Backing down would mean admitting error in a public space. Phones were out. Eyes were watching. Authority once asserted could not retreat without cost. So Keller doubled down. The cuffs were not just a tool, they were a decision. A refusal to reassess. A moment where ego overrode procedure. Neither man knew the full weight of what was unfolding yet. Daniel did not know how many cameras were capturing every second. Keller did not know who was about to become his accuser. But their histories mattered. One built on restraint discipline and respect for the law. The other shaped by unchecked confidence and a system that taught him mistakes could be absorbed without consequence. The collision in that garage was not random, it was inevitable. Because when power goes unexamined and bias goes unchallenged, the question is never if it will surface, only where. And that night it surfaced under flickering fluorescent lights between concrete walls, with steel closing around wrists that had written arguments capable of dismantling careers. The garage did not calm down after the cuffs closed. It changed. Sound traveled differently now. Footsteps slowed. Engines idled longer than necessary. The quiet was no longer empty. It was watching. Daniel stood exactly where he had been told. Wrists locked behind him, shoulders squared. He did not twist. He did not protest physically. His training told him stillness mattered. Every movement could be misread. Every reaction could be used later out of context, stripped of intention. Officer Keller stepped back and spoke into his radio voice clipped official. Dispatch? I have one male detained for suspicious activity. Requesting unit for transport. Daniel turned his head slightly. Detained. Not arrested. Words chosen carefully. He filed that away. Officer Daniel said measured and clear, I am asking again. Am I being detained or am I under arrest? Keller ignored the question. He circled Daniel slowly, eyes scanning the suit, the watch, the shoes. Expensive but understated. The kind of details that triggered assumptions without offering proof. You need to stop talking, Keller said. You talk yourself into more trouble. Daniel nodded once. He did stop talking. Not because he agreed, but because he understood escalation dynamics. He had cross-examined enough officers to know when silence was safer. The woman who had exited the elevator earlier now stood near the ramp phone held steady at chest height. She did not speak, but the red recording light was visible. A delivery driver leaned against his van, pretending to scroll while keeping the camera angled just enough. Keller noticed them. His posture stiffened. The presence of witnesses sharpened his tone instead of softening it. Sir, you fit the description of a suspicious individual reported in this garage. Daniel finally spoke again. What description? Late night, expensive vehicle, acting evasive. Daniel almost smiled, almost, acting evasive by unlocking a car. He took a breath. Officer, I am a city employee. I work downtown. I can provide identification if you remove the cuffs. Keller laughed once short and humorless. Everyone has a story. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not name his title yet. Not because he feared it, but because he understood something Keller did not. Once certain words were spoken, there was no undoing them. The reaction would not be neutral. It would be either submission or retaliation. Keller stepped closer again, lowering his voice. You think because you talk nice, you get special treatment. Daniel met his eyes for the first time. This is not about special treatment. This is about lawful procedure. That did it. Keller's face hardened. His jaw set. The words lawful procedure landed like a challenge, not a reminder. He reached out and adjusted the cuffs tighter just enough to make a point. You want to lecture me about the law while I'm doing my job. The pressure burned. Daniel's fingers tingled. He said nothing. A second patrol car rolled into the garage, lights flashing briefly before shutting off. Another officer stepped out, younger eyes moving quickly between Daniel Keller and the phones pointed in their direction. What's going on? The second officer asked. Suspicious person, call, Keller replied. Male refusing to comply, acting hostile. The younger officer hesitated. He looked at Daniel's suit, the car, the key fob still on the ground near the tire. He looked at the phones. Sir, do you have ID on you? The younger officer asked Daniel. Daniel answered him, not Keller. Yes, in my inside jacket pocket, left side. Keller snapped his head around. I did not authorize you to ask him questions. The younger officer took a half step back. I'm just trying to clarify. Clarify later, Keller said. He's going in. Those words landed heavier than the cuffs. Daniel felt the shift immediately. This was no longer a temporary stop. This was a commitment, a path chosen. As Keller guided him toward the patrol car, Daniel glanced once more at the phone's recording. He memorized faces. He noted angles. He tracked time. 8 minutes since first contact. No probable cause articulated. Ownership of the vehicle established. Continued detention. In his mind, a case was already forming. Keller opened the back door of the cruiser. The interior light revealed hard plastic seating, scuffed and stained. Daniel stepped in without resistance. The door closed with a hollow thud that echoed through the garage. As Keller walked back to the driver's side, the younger officer lingered for a moment, conflicted. He looked at Daniel through the window. Sir, he said quietly, we'll sort this out at the station. Daniel met his gaze. I know. The car pulled away, tires humming against concrete, leaving behind a garage full of witnesses and a trail of video that had already begun its own journey. The escalation was complete. What started as a baseless stop had become a public spectacle, and no one involved fully understood, yet how many careers, reputations, and institutions were about to be tested. The ride out of the garage was short but heavy. The patrol car climbed the concrete spiral, each turn pressing Daniel's shoulder slightly harder against the plastic seat. The cuffs cut deeper as the car leaned, metal biting into skin with every curve. The air inside smelled like disinfectant layered over old sweat and stale coffee. Keller drove without speaking. One hand on the wheel, one resting casually near the radio. The younger officer followed behind, and the second unit headlights filling the rear window like a silent question. Daniel stared forward. He counted breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, controlled. The same rhythm he used before closing arguments. Panic wasted energy. Clarity conserved it. At a red light, Keller glanced in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met briefly. Keller looked away first. You should have just listened, Keller said, breaking the silence. Daniel did not respond. There was nothing to gain from filling the space. The car pulled into the station lot at 9:34 p.m. Doors opened. Cool night air rushed in sharp against Daniel's wrists where circulation had begun to fade. Keller guided him out, one hand firm on his arm. Not violent, but deliberately possessive. Inside the station hummed with low routine noise. Phones ringing. A printer spitting out reports. Two officers laughed quietly near the lockers until they noticed Daniel and stopped. What do we have? One asked. Suspicious activity. Refusal to comply, Keller replied. Daniel stood straight as they removed his jacket and belt. The process was procedural, almost bored. Pockets emptied. Wallet placed on the counter. When the clerk opened it, his movements slowed. Sir, the clerk said, holding up an ID card between two fingers. Can you confirm this information? Daniel nodded. Yes. The clerk's eyes moved from the card to Daniel's face, then to Keller. He did not speak yet. He turned the card slightly, catching the light. The seal was unmistakable. the title printed clearly. Assistant District Attorney, City Prosecutor. The room shifted. The laughter from earlier stopped completely. A phone stopped ringing unanswered. Keller took a step forward. "That doesn't change anything," he said quickly. "Anyone can carry credentials." The clerk did not hand the card back. He looked at Keller carefully. "We need to notify a supervisor." Keller's jaw tightened. He glanced around, aware now of how many eyes were on him. Daniel finally spoke again. "Calm, even. I am requesting that you contact the on-call supervisor immediately." No one argued with that sentence. Minutes later, a lieutenant entered from the back offices. Mid-50s, graying hair, tired eyes, sharpened by experience. He took the ID card, read it once, then again. "Mr. Wright," he said, "I'm Lieutenant Harris." Daniel inclined his head slightly. Harris turned to Keller. "Where exactly did you detain him?" "Parking garage on 9th and Jefferson." "For what offense?" "Suspicious person call." Harris paused. "Did you establish probable cause?" Keller shifted his weight. He was evasive, refused to comply. Harris looked back at Daniel. "Mr. Wright, were you refusing to comply?" Daniel answered without heat. "I asserted my rights. I demonstrated ownership of my vehicle. I asked if I was being detained." Silence settled over the room. Harris exhaled slowly. He handed the ID back to the clerk. "Remove the cuffs." Keller hesitated. "Lieutenant." "Now." The sound of the cuffs unlocking was louder than before. Metal releasing. Blood rushing back into Daniel's hands with a painful tingle. He rolled his wrists once gently. "Mr. Wright, Harris said you are free to go." Daniel met his eyes. "I will be requesting all body camera footage, incident reports, and dispatch logs from tonight." Harris nodded. "You will have them." Daniel picked up his belongings. Jacket, wallet, keys. He did not rush. He did not gloat. As he walked toward the exit, Keller stood frozen, color draining from his face. Only then did the full weight of the injustice settle in. Not in the garage, not in the cuffs, but here under bright station lights where authority finally recognized what it had ignored minutes earlier. Daniel stepped outside into the night. The city felt different now. Sharper. Louder. Less forgiving. This was no longer just a mistake. It was a record. And records have consequences. The confirmation did not end the night. It only changed its direction. Daniel did not go home after leaving the station. He sat in his car for several minutes, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. The faint imprint of the cuffs still burned around his wrists, red lines slowly fading, but not disappearing. He replayed every word, every pause, every decision. Not emotionally, strategically. Inside the station, Lieutenant Harris stood in his office with the door closed. Keller remained outside, staring at nothing. The supervisor picked up the phone and dialed a number that bypassed normal channels. Captain Elaine Brooks answered on the second ring. "What do we have?" she asked. Harris spoke carefully. "We detained Daniel Wright tonight." There was a pause on the line. The city prosecutor. "Yes? How long?" "Approximately 16 minutes in custody. Initial detention longer." Another pause, heavier this time. "Did he identify himself?" "After arrival." Credentials were confirmed. Brooks exhaled slowly. "Secure all footage. Do not edit. Do not delay. I'm coming in." When Brooks arrived 20 minutes later, she did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She reviewed the body camera footage in silence. Keller standing in the garage. The key fob click. The questions ignored. The cuffs closing. The cameras in the background. When the video ended, she looked at Keller. "Explain your probable cause." Keller spoke faster than before. He cited training language, officer safety, non-compliance, suspicious behavior. Brooks cut him off. "Suspicious is not a crime." She tapped the screen. "He showed you ownership of the vehicle." He was evasive. By asking questions. Silence again. Brooks leaned back. "You detained the city's top prosecutor in a public garage with no articulable crime." Keller swallowed. "I didn't know who he was." Brooks' eyes hardened. "That is not a defense." Across the city, Daniel finally started his car and drove home. But he did not sleep. He opened his laptop at the kitchen table and began documenting. Timestamps. Names, badge numbers, exact phrases. He attached screenshots from witness videos already being sent to him by strangers who recognized his face from court. By morning, the story was no longer contained. At 7:42 a.m., the first clip appeared online. A 30-second video, a man in a suit being handcuffed next to a luxury sedan. The caption was simple: "Prosecutor arrested in parking garage for owning his car." By noon, it was everywhere. Local news vans lined the street outside police headquarters. Commentators replayed the footage frame by frame. Legal analysts pointed out each violation calmly, methodically, with devastating clarity. Fourth Amendment seizure without reasonable suspicion. Prolonged detention. Failure to de-escalate. Retaliatory arrest indicators. Inside City Hall, phones rang nonstop. The mayor demanded briefings. The police chief demanded answers. The union demanded restraint. Daniel released one statement. Short, precise. I was treated not as a citizen, but as a suspicion. This is not about my position. It is about the system that allowed this to happen. The revelation was complete now. Not just of Daniel's identity, but of a pattern. Of how easily authority hardened into abuse when unchecked. Of how quickly a routine stop became a public indictment. And Officer Keller, sitting alone in a small interview room under administrative review, finally understood the truth that arrived too late. The man in the garage had not been powerless. He had been patient. The lawsuit was filed 8 days later. 42 pages, single-spaced. Every paragraph numbered. Every claim anchored to timestamps and footage. Daniel Wright did not need outside counsel, but he chose it anyway. A civil rights firm known for dismantling departments piece by piece. Not loudly, precisely. The complaint named Officer Ryan Keller individually. It named the police department. It named the city. Unlawful detention. False arrest. Retaliation for protected speech. Violation of constitutional rights under color of law. The exhibit spoke louder than the words. Body camera footage, garage security video, cell phone recordings from 3 different angles. Dispatch audio confirming no crime had been reported. Internal policy manuals highlighted in yellow where Keller had deviated. The city attorney watched the footage once, then again, then called an emergency meeting. This is indefensible, she said flatly. Public reaction moved faster than the legal process. The first video crossed 1 million views in under 12 hours. By the second day, it was past 6 million. Comment sections filled with stories that sounded identical just without the credentials, without the ending. City employees came forward quietly. Officers spoke to reporters off record. Keller's name surfaced in old complaints. Patterns that had been dismissed as isolated suddenly aligned. Internal affairs reopened everything. They found the traffic stop from 3 years earlier. The pedestrian stop dismissed for lack of evidence. The note from a supervisor that said aggressive tone but effective results. Effective for whom? Keller was placed on unpaid administrative leave. His badge and firearm were taken. The union issued a statement defending due process. It did not defend the footage. The disciplinary hearing lasted 1 hour. Violation of department policy. Failure to articulate probable cause. Conduct unbecoming. Loss of public trust. Termination effective immediately. Keller did not speak as the decision was read. He stared at the table. 9 years gone in a paragraph. The city settled 3 weeks later. The amount was never debated, only approved. $750,000. Daniel accepted it without comment. He announced the funds would be divided. Half to a legal defense fund for wrongfully detained citizens. Half to mandatory training oversight independent of the department. The mayor stood at a podium and promised reform. New protocols, new review boards, new language. Daniel did not attend. Justice did not feel loud to him. It felt exact. A career ended. A system exposed. A precedent set. Not because the wrong person was stopped, but because the wrong assumption was allowed to survive too long. What happened in that parking garage was not complicated. It only felt complicated because power was involved. Under the law, the moment Officer Keller ordered Daniel Wright to stop and restricted his movement, a seizure occurred. The Fourth Amendment requires reasonable suspicion based on specific articulable facts that a crime is being committed. Not a feeling, not discomfort, not the price of a vehicle, not the tone of a voice. There was no reported crime. No theft, no damage, no attempt to flee. Daniel unlocked his own car. That fact alone dissolved any lawful basis for continued detention. Everything that followed, the prolonged questioning, the tightening of cuffs, the transport to the station, moved from error into violation. Equally important is what did not justify the arrest. Asserting constitutional rights is not obstruction. Asking whether one is being detained is not defiance. Silence is not guilt. Courts have ruled this repeatedly, not in theory, but in cases where lives were disrupted exactly this way. Then there is the human layer. Bias rarely announces itself loudly. It operates quietly, filling gaps with assumptions. Black man. Expensive car. Late hour. Those details formed a narrative before evidence was even considered. Once that narrative hardened, contrary facts stopped mattering. That is how ordinary encounters become extraordinary harms. For viewers, there are lessons here that extend beyond this story. If you are stopped, remain calm. Do not escalate physically. Ask clearly whether you are being detained. If so, comply while documenting mentally. If you are free to go, leave. If witnesses are present, their cameras are not threats. They are records. For bystanders, filming matters, not commentary, not confrontation, just steady documentation, angle, time, continuity. For institutions, training without accountability is decoration. Early complaints matter. Patterns matter. Systems that protect misconduct eventually inherit its consequences. Daniel Wright did not win because of his title. He won because the law was on his side and the truth was recorded. Most people never get that combination. So the final question is not about one officer or one night. It is about what happens when authority is questioned and whether systems choose correction or denial. Because justice is not proven by who is punished. It is proven by whether the next person is protected.